Hey guys, so my name is Jasmine or Dawes. I'm a third year student here at Oglethorpe University, and I am hoping to get my biology degree by spring 2022, so next year. So for this topic, I decided to focus on feral cats, and what we are going to look at them through is a lens of looking at feral cats as a significant environmental threat and how it is that they can be controlled or how it is that they have been controlled. So the reason why I chose this topic is because I think we have all experienced a specific living in a specific environment where feral cats have been present. So for example, in my own apartment complex throughout the years, basically every year that I have lived here, I always see the growing population of stray feral cats that are in them. And maybe you yourself have experienced seeing them, such as on campus, where I have yet to see them, but I have heard that there are feral cat populations there. So I think that often we as a society tend to either ignore or maybe are oblivious to how it is that feral cats are actually very dangerous to the environment. And I wanted this to be like a focus on why it is that they are so dangerous and what can be done about controlling the populations instead of looking at feral cats as just cute little animals that should be allowed to roam freely when in reality they are a danger. Sorry. So in this talk, we're going to analyze what are feral cats specifically, what are the consequences to not controlling their populations, and what it is that has been done or can be done to control these growing populations. So here we see a feral cat that has just caught its prey, and as we can see, it's a small animal of some sort. So feral cats, by definition, are cats that live in the wild or are wild themselves, meaning that they do not rely on humans for a major part of their feeding as well as shelter. They create their own shelter within the environment that they are in, and they get their nutrition by hunting other small animals. Cats themselves are omnivores, meaning that they only eat meat, and this can range from eating small things like insects to bigger things like birds, bats, rodents. Basically, they eat anything that they can get their paws on, and sadly, this includes threatened and endangered species. We're going to look at what research has been done on the sense of the threat that feral cats present to their environment by looking at the diets, what they eat, and then later on acknowledging, once we've acknowledged that they're a threat, we're going to see how it is that we can get rid of them. So we're going to look at an article that describes why it is the cats are so bad to the environment. So the first research we're going to look at is feral cats threaten the outstanding endemic fauna of the New Caledonia biodiversity hotspot. This research was mainly written by P. Palmas and H. Jordan. It was published in 2017 in the Bioconservation Journal. So it looks at the fact that cats are some of the most successful and harmful invasive predator species. New Caledonia, as we can see on the right here, is a small island in the South Pacific Ocean near Australia. So it being an island, cats were initially introduced as a means of controlling the rodent population that had been brought in by ships. However, they soon became a problem because, like I said, they are some of the most successful predator species that threaten biodiversity within the New Caledonian archipelago. Cats themselves were not introduced until around 1860. And once they were introduced, the population steadily and fastly increased until it became a problem. So this research is an intensive 6-year look into the cat scat samplings. Cat scats, if you don't know, is basically the poop of cats, the droppings, and that is analyzed in order to further analyze what it is that their exact diets are. Within these diets, what we really care about is seeing if there are any species included within the diets that are red listed threatened species, which means that they are near extinction or vulnerable to extinction. The reason we want to look at is so that look at these red listed species is so that we can come up with suitable management for the cat populations. Methods. So this research started off by dividing the seasons into 2 main seasons, a hot wet season lasting from November to April, and a cold dry season which lasted from May to October. The reason why they divided the seasons into 2 main ones is because climatic contrasts lead to different habitats, which leads to different vegetation within those habitats, which also leads to different population sizes and different types of species that are expected to be found. The seasons themselves were defined by the average of monthly precipitations or rain and the average monthly temperatures. Then the research was further cut down into 4 major habitats, which again represent a wide range of different climatic conditions, different vegetation, which in turn different species amounts. Over here on the left, we see a map that highlights the specific habitats that were defined within the research paper. So we see that the dry forest is highlighted here in red. It's mostly near the coast, so it's a little hard to see, but it's there. It's in more tiny spots, and like I said, it's more along the coast. When we look at the humid forest, we look at the green highlighted areas. When we look at the McKee's mosaic, we look at the orange highlighted areas. The limestone forest is over here in gray, more on the islands near the main New Caledonia. And then what's highlighted in beige is the savanna, which is what we didn't specifically look at, so we are not going to worry too much about that. So scat analysis is, scat analysis came from 14 different areas from within the 4 specific habitats that we are going to look at. So the 4 habitats each had marked off 14 different areas in which the scats were collected. Scats were collected from paths and rural roads that cats were mostly seen as using. The scat analysis or scat gathering lasted from 2011 to 2016. Once the scats were gathered, they were washed and sieved in order to find specific identifiers to the prey categories. These identifiers range from small bones, looking at the structure of those bones, to more obvious identifiers like bird feathers, maybe the animal's teeth, or fur that was found within the scat. There were 8 prey categories that were assigned. So there was the rodents, which is what cats were initially meant to only eat, or mostly eat. Bats, birds, squamates, which are small reptiles like lizards or geckos. Arthropods, which are insects, fishes, plant materials, and finally anthropogenic refuse, which is the food that the industrial food that humans may be leaving out or giving to these cats. So the diet indexes that were used were FO, frequency of occurrence, and minimum number of individual prey for squamates. The significant relationships were capped at a alpha number of 0.05, so anything above that was not considered significant. So when we look at the image to the left, we are looking at analyzing within these habitats what the cat diets consisted of compared to the amount of rodents that were ate. So as we can see over here in black is the percentage of what the diet consisted of when it came down to only rodents. In white, we see the diet when it consisted of anything else but rodents. In gray, we see the mixture of rodents and native prey categories found within these cats that were analyzed. So as we can see, it is not very often the cats don't eat rodents, but it is important to note that even though they mostly eat rodents, within those categories, we also see them eating them with a mixture of other prey, which does include endangered species. So as we can see, 5,356 cats were analyzed, were able to be analyzed and have good identifiers with them in order to control data into specific species that were ate. We see that the highest percentage of the cat diet consisted of rodents, but was followed by squamates and arthropods. Anthropogenic refuse was found at only 2.9%, meaning the cats were not heavily relying on humans for their feeding. When we analyze the results of significance between habitat and seasonal effect, we see that rodents do have a significant effect of habitat, meaning that in a specific habitat, rodents are the highest within that habitat. In this case, it is the humid forest. We also see that there is a seasonal effect, meaning that we see a higher frequency in the dry season. For bat remains, we see that cats ate them in all habitats except the dry forest. We see that there is a significant relationship of habitat for these bats. And there's no effect of season, meaning that whether it was considered a dry or a cold season, bats were basically eaten mostly the same throughout. For birds, we see that they are also hunted in all habitats. There's an effect of habitat, a significant effect of habitat, meaning that we found the frequency occurrence the highest at the limestone forest. And there's also an effect of season, so they were seen as preyed upon the most within the wet season. For squamates, they also have a significant effect of habitat, but like bats, they have no effect on season, which again means that they were ate mostly the same in numbers throughout dry, wet, cold seasons. Same goes for arthropods. The effect of season was not considered significant, but they did also have an effect of habitat, meaning that they were ate, or there was the frequency occurrence the highest at the limestone forest. So what we really care about is what endangered species are found within these cat diets or cat scats. We see that there are 44 native vertebrate species within the diet, meaning that out of everything that was found within the diet themselves, 44, which is a high number, were native animals that were hunted upon by these invasive cats. From these native species, it includes 3 bat species, 6 bird species, 2 gecko species, and 33 skink species. Within these native species, we find that 20 are in the IUCN red-listed threatened species. These species include 2 flying fox species, 16 skinks, 1 seabird, and 1 parakeet. Out of these 20, we see that 5 are critically endangered, 9 are endangered, and 6 are vulnerable species, meaning that within the cat diets, we do see that they have a direct correlation of effect in whether species are considered vulnerable or actually go extinct. Analyzing the data, it is seen that feral cats are everywhere at all times. They have invaded the entire New Caledonia archipelago and are present year-round. Whether it's hot, cold, rain, dry, cats are seen preying upon the native species, even in the most remote habitats. Feral cats fed on a wide range of prey, which again goes from something as tiny as a little insect to something bigger like bats, which is surprising to most. You wouldn't expect a cat to eat bats, but it does happen. Feral cats have led to extinctions and declines worldwide, and we see that they have led to extinctions here within the New Caledonia itself, and are possibly contributing to new extinctions, like was previously mentioned, that they, within their diet, you do find endangered species. So what is suggested from this research is that active control of cat populations is implemented within sites that are key to threatened species conservation, meaning that where we see the highest number of threatened species population, they should actively, quickly act on controlling the cat population in order to minimize the effect of extinction that they can have. So again, feral cat management is recommended as something that must be done quickly before they lead to further extinction of native species within the New Caledonia. So now that we have acknowledged that cats themselves lead to direct endangerment of native species population, we can look at a research that focuses on a successful eradication of cats. So this research is titled "A Review of the Successful Eradication of Feral Cats from Subantarctic Marion Island, Southern Indian Ocean." This research has its main publishers listed as D. Bester and J.P. Bloomer. It is a collection of past research, but it was published in 2002 in the South African Journal of Wildlife Research. So again, within this island, we said cats were introduced as a means of controlling rat populations. But 10 years later, instead of it being cats versus the mice, the cats themselves became the problem, actively overhunting the native bird populations of the Marion Island. So the active plan was to analyze their impact and then come up with a plan to eradicate these cat populations in order to promote the breeding of endangered bird species. The eradication program came in multiple phases and lasted for 19 years. Phase 1 started in 1974. So it basically started by gathering the cat population information, looking at their habitats, at what their diet is, how it is that they interact with their environment. It was seen that cats have around 26% increase per year in their population. It was considered important and urgent to come up with a plan that halted this increase. Within the research that was done on gathering what the cat population was, it was found that they had led to the early local extinction of a bird subspecies, which again promoted the urgent need to eradicate the cats. It was decided that they should settle on a biological control of population, meaning that they decided to settle on a virus that had been previously researched. So in 1976, it was decided that the biological control would be the feline Panleukopenia virus. In 1975, there was some sub-research done, which demonstrated that cats were fully susceptible. It was an easily spread virus, and it did not seem to have the cat populations didn't have quick mutations that would give resistance to the virus. So in 1976, the virus was officially released to the cat world. In 1977, the cat population was around 3,405. 96 infected cats were released within the span of 3 days in 93 different places within the island. In 1976 through 1978, research on the effect of the virus was continued. So it was found that 53.6% of the cat population had decreased in just 18 months since the release of the virus. There were also different methods tested on as a secondary control to catch cats. Like was previously mentioned, cats tend to be active predators, meaning that they, I guess you could say, enjoy the act of catching their prey. So traps were not considered effective at this high population because cats are not scavengers. Instead, it was settled on hunting as a secondary control method. In phase 5 and 6 consisted of mostly looking at how the virus and the hunting method worked together. It was found that although there was a 26% decline per year from the virus, it did stabilize between 1982 and 1983, meaning that after a certain amount of years, cats were able to develop mutations that made them resist the larger effects of the virus, making them basically immune to the virus. Within the research done on the new cat populations, it was found that as in specific areas, cat populations decreased significantly, bird populations were in turn able to increase significantly. In 1986, the main focus of the research changed to the full-scale hunting. It was found that hunting needed to be year-round in order to be considered effective in controlling the cat populations. So the virus was basically abandoned. It was considered that it would take too much time and money to maybe come up with a new virus that cats weren't susceptible to. So it was basically abandoned, and the control method was changed to the hunting. In the final phase, they decided to combine hunting and traps. Traps were now considered effective because of the minimized cat population. So it was easier to set up the traps and attract a larger amount of cats compared to when the population was at around 3,000 or more. Hunting and traps accounted for 54 and 91% respectively for the removal of the cats. Hunting was later on considered as not effective as it had been in the past few years because they started to look at the environmental effects that hunting itself had, and they decided to abandon it due to cost and the damages that it was creating to the environment. So there was a shift to go from hunting and trapping to trapping and poisoning. Basically, the poison was laid out for cats by laying out infected chickens and that the cats would go eat and then die off. The last cats were seen in July 1991. So it was considered the successful eradication of cats. No more cats were seen for the next 9 years since this was published, since the final phase 7 was published. Once they saw the successful eradication of cats, they also saw an increased breeding success of birds, meaning that bird populations, species that were back then considered endangered or close to extinction, were able to recover in their number. It is important to note that Marion Island had specific factors that gave them campaign success. So even though these phases may be successful to them, there are factors that are specific to Marion Island that gave them the success. For example, one of them being that it's an island, so it's easier to control the cat populations since it is not as large as in, let's say, America. And there's also important moral codes that were maybe not as seen as important back then, such as maybe now in 2020, we wouldn't consider it moral to go out and actively hunt cats even though they're feral and a danger, versus in 1970, 1980, when the main focus was just getting rid of the cats and not necessarily looking at whether it was a moral issue or not to kill them. So even though this research does focus more on what big government spending can do to control cat populations, there are also things that we ourselves can do. So if we have pet cats, we can neuter them and we can keep them inside, because pet cats are meant to be inside cats, in order to avoid the interaction between pet cats and feral cats that could possibly lead to an excessive increase in the feral stray cat population, as well as making sure that our own pet cats are not predators to the native species that live outside. Again, if you live in a place where you often see a large population of stray or feral cats, you can always call animal control and they will help control the large increasing numbers of feral cats. And we all can do our own part to take care of the environment and of native species that live within it. What's the take-home message? Why does it matter? I would argue that it matters because cats are a problem. They cause a lot of damage to the environment that they invade. They kill whatever they can, which again ranges from a small little bug to something as big as birds or bats or mice. They damage habitats that they live in, and they can lead to the extinction of specific species. They're opportunistic feeders, which means that everything and anything that is smaller than them is in danger, especially once the cat populations are overpopulated or in such great numbers that the cat population itself can lead to extinction and endangerment of a certain species. We've looked at the control attempts, so we know that there is a somewhat successful campaigns that can be taken within other countries or applied to other countries with modified, of course, controls to possibly eradicate cats once they become an overpopulation and a sincere major problem, such as leading to the extinction of certain species. So this was my talk about why it is that feral cats are so dangerous. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, that you guys understood that feral cats are a danger. Even though we see them as cute animals, it's important to keep in mind that they are a danger to the environment that they invade, because they often do tend to be an invasive species, and that there are control methods that can be taken in order to eradicate cats. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to promote the eradication of feral cats once they have become a threat to native species. Thanks, guys.